credentials that I have to take my time in letting you know and reading out this morning, because it is important that you know exactly who they are with me in studio this morning. My first guest has a very wonderful name, Edwige Jean-Francois is her name. Now, she's a multilingual. It's Jean-Francois. Yeah, Jean-Francois. But I'll let her pronounce it herself when it's her turn to speak. Now, let me tell you who she is. She's a multilingual, award-winning global journalist and producer, and the inaugural executive director of the Center of Studies on Africa and its diaspora. Now, she has over 20 years experience in journalism, and she's traveled extensively. She's going to be telling us about all of that. And she's been documenting on stories of people from all walks of life. Now, it's also notable that she either launched, led, or partnered on several programs and strands on CNN's Africa programming, including African Voices, Marketplace Africa, Inside Africa, and Africa Startup. Now, this one will blow you away. She was the senior producer of the CNN series Business Traveler with Richard Quest, and filed reports on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer and Vital Signs with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Edwige Jean-Francois, you're welcome. Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Anyway.
You say it so beautifully.
Oh, I do. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Well, she's not the only one here. This morning, Elizabeth J. West is also here. This is special because she's a linguist. I know why I'm saying she's a linguist, and she's a professor of English. I need to speak impeccable English this morning just so I end up somewhere that I don't want to end up this morning. Well, she's also a professor of English and the John B. and Eliana Diaz Verson Amos Distinguished Chair in English Letters at Georgia State University. Now, she also served previously as the executive director of the South Atlantic Modern Language Association and also treasurer of the College of Language Association. Listen, she's an award winner. There's a book that is out there. The title is Finding Francis. I'm going to be asking who Francis is this morning. But of course, she's an advocate for Juneteenth. And we all know that on the 19th of June every year is celebrated as a holiday in America. I mean, for the third time. And that is so laudable. These are my guests in studio this morning. We're about to have a great conversation. Ladies, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry if I left anything out. We'll be touching on all of them as we move along. Edwige. Too many credentials. Lord Jesus, you should have been here. But she doesn't like the screens. Have you done any on screen at all?
No, not really. I've always been behind the scenes.
All 20
I've always
years?
been making what we call in journalism, making the sausage happen, as you know.
Making the sausage
happen.
I see.
That's how we refer to it.
Fantastic.
You know how it is.
Yes, I know.
Yes,
I'm very much aware of how it is right here. Anyway, so let me just ask, where are you from? Originally from Africa? Anywhere here in Africa?
So I was born in Haiti. I was born in Haiti,
okay.
and I left when I was 7 years old, and grew up in New York and in Canada.
Okay.
And so a proud member of the Haitian diaspora, if you will. And journalism to me was a natural progression.
Okay.
I remember growing up, my father and I would we would watch the news together. He would come home after work, and we'd sit, watch the news, talk about events. And he was always very keen about talking about the portrayal sometimes of how Black people were portrayed and what was projected in the news. So for me, that was the beginning of getting into that career.
Right. So you were 7 when you left Haiti. Do you remember anything at all in those 7 years?
I do, and it's interesting because I left when I was 7, and then I went back about 20 years later for the first time. So the memories of childhood that I have in my head, when I actually went back, nothing was there, nothing existed.
Everything changed.
Everything changed, but I have these memories, these really, really fond memories of growing up in Haiti, and I've always loved it. And I've continuously traveled there for work, for family reunions, And so it's a very, very important part of my identity.
Yeah, and we've been told many times that Haiti has a lot of similarities with Africa, Ghana for that matter. You've been here for how many days now?
So this, now you're gonna, I think this is my 4th day. All the days are running into each other.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is my 2nd time in Ghana.
Ghana, okay.
And I realized the first time I was on the continent, I went to South Africa and I went to Soweto. I was like, this is Haiti.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm in Lagos, this is Haiti. I come here, this is Haiti. So I feel like it so reminds me of home, and it feels like home, and some of the mannerisms, some of the sounds that people make, the gestures.
Almost the same,
almost
right?
the same.
We're
Almost
truly
the
one
same.
people.
We truly are one people.
We truly
are one people. And I think that's why it's so important to work in the space of promoting Africa and the African diaspora and making sure that those alliances are forged and are strong, which is part of the work at CSAD at Georgia State University, the Center for Studies on Africa and its diaspora, because of the reality that we are one people.
You're very welcome. Good to see you. Elizabeth, would this be your first time in Ghana?
It is my first time in Ghana. It's my first time on the continent south of the Sahara. So it's a lot of firsts.
Welcome to the motherland. What took you so long, though? You should have been here a long time ago.
I was asking myself on the 10-hour flight here why it took so long.
Yeah. But what have been your experiences so far? How many days? 4 days for you as well?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What would you say? How was the feeling like when you first touched down?
It felt like home.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Probably because I had the pleasure of sitting next to a native Ghanaian on the flight
on the plane?
over. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a wonderful introduction to Ghana. And when I landed, it just felt good.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we would say Akwaba, meaning you're welcome. So that's our Tree language, one of our languages, our dialects that we speak here in the country. So it's not English, one of our traditional languages, but it's the main one spoken by almost everybody. So when we meet people like you who are visiting for the first time, second time, would say Akwaba. So anytime you say Akwaba, it means that you are welcome. Exactly what it means. Akwaba. Anyway, yes, Akwaba.
In Haiti, we have something, I guess, similar. When you sit down, you meet people, you say honneur, and then they say respect, which means honor and respect, as a traditional greeting.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Honneur,
respect.
Okay. And so Akwaba. Fantastic. Anyway, so she is into journalism. You are into English. You've become an English professor. Why English? Why wasn't it French, Spanish, or anything else? Was that part of you growing up? She was watching the news with her dad when she was growing up. Did that come from mommy, daddy? How did it come about?
Well, it came from loving to read. My mother was a teacher, an elementary school teacher, and my aunts were teachers, and I got a lot of books as a kid. So the books took me into a lot of worlds. So English, to me, is a way of managing and thinking about words in literature, but it's also a way of entering other worlds. So I came to English actually as a second choice, because my first degree was actually in the sciences. So I've kind of melded those two worlds, and it's a nice marriage.
Fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations on that one. Now, I'll come back to you, Edwige. Your story is very interesting, and I want to take you back to when you were growing up. So some parts of you already knew that you were going to be a journalist. Of course, it started with daddy and all that. But is that what you studied in school?
I studied English.
What an irony. Are you kidding me?
I was an English major.
Are you serious?
I was an English major, and I minored in Spanish.
Okay.
And then I also took a lot of coursework in philosophy. But yeah, so we kind of bonded on that front. Yeah, I was. And it started in the same way, loving to read. So when I came to the U.S., I grew up speaking Creole and French, and I didn't speak English. So reading really was the way I essentially taught myself, even as a child. I remember I would read books, underline words, and then look them up in the dictionary because I didn't know what the word meant, so I had to go back, look it up, kept reading. So just the love of books. And the other thing is, when you read, that sense of seeing new worlds and imagining going to new places. So it kind of fit with the narrative that I was starting to build in my mind, that I wanted to be in journalism, and combining that with the passion to see the world and travel. And a lot of that came from books. You know, you can be transported to other worlds. So that's how that came to be. But yeah, I studied English.
Fantastic. What was your first job after school?
My first job after school, I was very lucky.
Okay.
So my very first job after school was after grad school, I should say, was I worked for ABC News in New York. And I started as a desk assistant, which, you know, is like a glorified grunt. You know, run, fetch, coffee. And I remember, like, it was a pretty big deal when you had to bring the scripts to the anchor desk, right? So I imagine the people bringing you your scripts, and it was just like, oh my God, you're shaking. And then you really were trusted if you were given the scripts to like run to the control room when news was breaking, because part of it you had to keep it all together. And then eventually I went from being sort of like a general assignment DA, desk assistant, to working on the Peter Jennings show. He was a renowned newsman, and that was a huge deal. So my first job, actually, I started at the network level, which in New York City. So I lucked out, and it was through networking, through an alumni connection. Remember interviewing 4 times for that job, and ultimately ended up getting it, and that's how I started in the business.
So how did you land at CNN? What was the phone call? Did you go seeking for the job? Somebody referred you? What's the story?
So it's interesting because it's so layered, and without getting into all the layers, I had actually applied to CNN. So one of the things I do, I have a drawer where I keep all my rejection letters.
You do?
I do.
And you have a number of them?
I have a number of them, right? Just to kind of remind you from whence you've come, like to kind of be like, hey, you know, this didn't stop me. So I have either 1 or 2 rejection letters from CNN in my desk drawer. But ultimately, how I ended up at CNN was a good friend of mine was working there, and at the time, a position opened up, and she called me up and she said, you know, I think you'd be great. You should apply. Applied for the position, and ultimately it didn't work out. I ended up not accepting the offer, if you will. And then I went and got another job at the AP. I was covering the White House, and then ended up getting the position at CNN. So it wasn't a straight line. But all of that to say is, you know, despite the rejections, it came to be ultimately, right? And everybody has their own way of getting to CNN. But again, I remember when I was in grad school, it was one of the goals. Like, you know, you would watch Cristiano Amanpour, and you're like, I want to be at CNN, and it happened. So,
fantastic! Congratulations. Now, I'm going to come back to you, Elizabeth, but I just want to ask you. So, what kept you undeterred? I mean, a few rejection letters here and there. What kept you moving?
You know what? My father. Again, I go back to him because, you know, he was an immigrant, and he always had that sense of pride and home and know who you are. It's something he would always say, know who you are, know who you are. He had a way of talking about himself in the third person, so which sort of like elevated him even more. And so he would be like, you know, it will work out. Don't worry about it. You know, it will happen. And I kind of moved on and did other projects. Like I said, I was working, I was a producer at the White House, so other things were happening in my career. And when it finally happened, it happened in a very natural, organic way. I started on the political side, working in Washington, and then transitioned to the international side, working for the global side of the company.
Fantastic. Well, all the lines fell in pleasant places for you. Elizabeth, is your story similar?
It starts with English.
So it's always been English for you. Okay, so how did you end up being a professor then?
Actually, quite by accident. I was working actually in private industry. And working in the telecommunications industry. And I could never stop going to school. So even, you know, when I was working in my career, you know, immediately after my first undergrad degree, I just kept going to school. I went to school for an MBA and was 2 classes to finish that, and I moved. So anyway, when I moved south to Atlanta, as I was working, I was thinking that would help me progress in the company I was with, and I was thinking of human relations.
Right.
And so I started, but then I found out I had to take an English course. And when I took that English course, I found out that the company would also pay for an English degree. So at that point, I said,
like,
well,
why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Right. So that started it. So I started all over. I had a degree in chemistry. And so I started all over, got a BA, MA in English, and then went on to get my PhD.
Wow.
And I just learned that English can, as Edwige just
Right.
talked about, it can lead you down so many roads. And so it's been exciting because you teach students as an English professor, you see all the students.
Yeah.
And so you have students who end up being journalists, who end up being attorneys, writers for executives. I mean, just all kinds of things.
What's the feeling like seeing them, seeing their dreams come into fruition? And you know that I taught her, I taught him.
Yeah.
What's the feeling like?
It's rewarding. It's rewarding, and you understand the importance of what you're doing. That you don't touch, a lot of people, but the
Right.
people you touch, you can make a big difference, and then it gets to be exponential because everybody that you touch, they're going to go out into the
Right.
world and,
Right.
and touch 100 other people. Yeah,
Right.
and it multiplies.
Congratulations on all that.
Yeah.
And congratulations on your 2023 College Language Association Book Award. You have a book out there called Finding Francis, One Family's Journey from Slavery to Freedom. Where did that come from?
It came from initially a very personal place. The book started as a project for my family, actually.
So who's Francis?
Francis is my ancestor who was enslaved in the 19th century. When I started the project, I had no knowledge about Francis or even my family's earlier years or in Georgia before this was before the Civil War. So in just trying to document the information that older folks in my family had, just documenting that led me to this person, Francis, who I discovered through the records. And so that took me on this long journey into the archives and interviewing people, and it ended up ultimately in the book.
Fantastic. Congratulations on that. I would love to read that book. I mean, there will be a lot of emancipation, a lot of stories over there. I would love to have a good read for myself. Anyway, so we're going to get into the story of why you guys are here in Ghana. But before then, I'll not let you go. Tell me, what was it like working on all those stories and with these people at the CNN, Wolf Blitzer, Richard Quest and all that? Tell me, on a daily, describe to us how a production would come about.
It's very intense, obviously, and it starts with an idea. Like any production, it starts with an idea, and like for example, we did this half-hour show out of Nigeria on the Afro-Brazilian community.
Right, I think I saw that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so basically it starts with the idea, and at the time I was working with a really terrific producer in country who started to find the people, the community, the families we would be talking to. And then once you have the different possibilities, you sort of start to shape the story and what it would look like. And what was fascinating about that story, that particular program that I did, was they were Nigerians living in Lagos, but feeling more like Brazilians, where their ancestors had been taken to Brazil and came back, and they still kept the traditions, they ate the foods, they did carnival, and so they essentially had a foot in each world, which was very fascinating to me. And so at the time we went, I was in Lagos for 3 weeks, interviewing people and putting it together. And so that was for Inside Africa. And then I did a whole other program working with Richard Quest, looking at business travel, as you know, can be challenging in terms of intra-Africa flying. And we talked to a number of sectors. We talked to people from Air Peace at the time. We talked to Mo Abadou. We did something on etiquette. And it was a segment where he sat down and they talked about African etiquette. And it's essentially, for me, what I try to do is get into the space of where I'm going before I go there. So you're not this interloper, you just come in, you drop, and then you tell the story and you leave. And particularly, you know, when you're a Black person, you're on the continent, you already feel that sense of home. And it's logistically crazy, the hours are long, but there's also something, as you know, working in journalism, that part of it is adrenaline when you're a creative person. Part of it is wanting to see what's in your head come to fruition, which is one of the productions we worked on together, the readathon, the global readathon, and actually Akosu Abusia, who played Nettie in The Color Purple, she was one of the people who read. We had a famous author, Edwige Dansika, who read as well. And a lot of it is taking that, what's in your head, and then storytelling and building the narrative for the audience.
Fantastic. I see.
Yeah.
Good stuff. but this time around, I know it's not journalism that brought you into Accra, Ghana, and it's not English that brought you necessarily. What brings you here? Why are you guys here this morning?
So
we're
here for ASWAD, a conference of academics, and for me, one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here is because I'm new to academia, and I try to, with anything I do, learn, become part of this new community. I've been at Georgia State University now for a year, and this is my second academic conference. I first went with Elizabeth to one, the College Language Arts Association in Atlanta. So as a center that focuses on Africa and the African diaspora, it is important to convene and come here and learn and exchange ideas and learn from each other. And we're actually presenting, our presentation is focused on multimodal ways of communicating and sharing African history. And part of what I bring to the role with my background is visualizing the research that is being conducted, the work that the students are doing. How do we take something, for example, like a book ban that's very academic, but put it together in a way, communicate it together in a way that can connect to a larger audience. So I'm excited to be here. This is my second time, and I'm looking forward to attending the panels and meeting more people in the space. And I know it's for you. It's exciting for you to be here as well, Elizabeth.
Anyway, so she's mentioned that it's exciting, but I want to understand how important it is for you to be connecting to the motherland and bringing all these stories, connecting with the people and impacting as well. What does it mean to you?
To borrow a phrase that Edwige brought to us in the center, it's because you know, the focus is Africa everywhere, and I think it's important for African Americans, for Africans across the diaspora, to be aware of the history, the common thread that points to Africa, and that's not insignificant. And so the center, you know, our center at Georgia State was founded on that, you know, on that principle, because so many of us who are Black outside the continent are left with this feeling of, you know, living without a past. And if we, you know, if we don't advocate for interrogating history more thoroughly, for, you know, for connecting, for making those connections between where we are today and how, you know, and how we get there, then again, you're this tree without roots. And so you have to be active in making that kind of knowledge making happen. And so the center at its heart is about that, bringing this understanding, to ourselves within the academy, but outside the academy about the important history of Africa throughout the world and of people of African descent throughout the world and the contributions that they've made.
I see. So how long is this conference? When is it happening? Today, tomorrow? When is it?
It ends on Saturday.
Okay.
And so we are presenting on Friday.
Okay.
And it's different academic panels, any topic you can imagine, the diaspora, Africa. We're presenting on visual methods of storytelling. And also, too, there are tours involved as part of the conference, so people get to go on tours. And so, as Elizabeth was saying, and I like your line, a tree without roots.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And it's something that I feel personally and deeply as well. It's work, but it's also, as a member of the African diaspora, you do always feel like there's that sense that there's something missing.
Right.
And so this conference is a chance to engage, reconnect, meet with people here in Ghana, meet with other scholars, talk about what the issues are, because while the issues are different depending on where in the world you live or where on the continent you live, there is that common thread. And I think it's critical for us to be here at a time that education, Black scholarship is under attack, frankly, right? Where you have books being banned, you have, it's more than that. It's voting rights. It's all these challenges that we see while there may not be the political instability that, well, I take that back, right? That we see in some places. So this is important for us to be here and to be part of this conference.
Right. So at the end of the conference, what do you seek to achieve? What would you love to see happen? Or what's the impact you would have loved to see before this conference ends?
I think for me, one of the things that's important, and I go back to the readathon, one of the things that we were able to do is partner with the Gambia, with the U.S. Embassy in the Gambia and Jamaica, is to really begin to make inroads in partnerships with other African countries as well as within the diaspora. Because many of us work in this space, and these gatherings are an ability to come together and share knowledge. So my hope is to take this knowledge back, see what we can implement in the center, see the exchanges we can make, see the research that can come from this. How do we get students engaged? What are the opportunities for them to come to the continent? What are the opportunities for them to exchange knowledge with other institutions? So I see this conference more as a beginning than really something that starts and then ends on Saturday.
Right. Elizabeth, for you as well, I mean personally, and for the CSAD as well, what would you like to achieve at the end of this conference?
Very similar to what Edwige has noted. If you think about the acronym OSWAD, which is the organization that sponsors the conference, it's the Association for Studies of the Wide World African Diaspora. And I mean, just that title gives you a sense of the intent of the organization. And in a place, especially holding it in a place like Ghana, you realize why the organization is so important. You know, when you think of the legacy of Nkrumah and people like Lumumba on the continent here, and how they were part of this, kind of vanguard of fighters in the 50s and 60s. Who were advocating for Africans everywhere. And so, especially this year for OSWAD to be in Ghana. On a personal level, I'm here because it's important to get that spirit reignited because there's so much out here that is a force against this. And so to come here and to be with scholars, other scholars who are doing this kind of work, to to share knowledge, build new relationships, that's to me, the real benefit of this.
Fantastic. I get to see you on Friday. It's Friday, University of Ghana, Legon. You're both speakers on Friday, you mentioned. Okay, do you know the time?
I think 10. I have to look. It's the mid-morning one.
Okay,
So
mid-morning.
10, I think it's the 10 o'clock one.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna invite some of my girlfriends to come and take a listen to you too as well.
Yes.
It's been amazing speaking with you this morning.
Likewise.
Yes.
And I have to ask you before.
Ask me.
How did you come to journalism? You talked about English. A journalist never leaves the table without asking a question.
How about I tell you behind the scenes?
Okay.
I'll tell you the story behind the scenes. But my guest in studio this morning, Elizabeth J. West, she's a professor of English, of course. She is with SCAD as well, and she's here attending the ASWAD conference, as well as Edwige Jean-Francois. I love her name. She's an award-winning global journalist and producer as well. And like she said, once a producer and once a journalist, always a journalist. All the best with the conference. We'll get to speak a lot afterwards as well and see how we can also get to be part of the CSAD here in Ghana as well. It's been amazing speaking to you. It's still TV3 New Day. Stay with us. We have a lot more coming up.